How does it feel to be replaceable? The question hung over our cafeteria table, silencing all conversation. My fork paused midway to my mouth. 5 coworkers suddenly became intensely interested in their lunch trays, eyes down, shoulders hunched. Terrence leaned back in his chair, a smirk playing at the corner of his lips. He deliberately raised his voice when asking the question, ensuring neighboring tables could hear. I carefully placed my fork down and dabbed the corner of my mouth with my napkin. What an interesting question to ask during lunch, I replied, keeping my voice steady despite the heat crawling up my neck. Just thinking about the future, Terrence continued, examining his watch. The expensive one he mentioned purchasing at least weekly. Budget reviews are coming. Executive team needs to know who's truly essential. His eyes fixed on me. And who isn't? I felt Faye's knee press against mine under the table. Silent support. Wyatt cleared his throat but said nothing. Some positions seem important until you look closer, Terrence added, staring directly at me now. Like yours, Merritt. A few awkward chuckles bubbled around the table. Darcy suddenly needed something from the salad bar and escaped. That's when I noticed Imani, our CEO, approaching with her tray. She'd been eating just 2 tables away. This sounds like an engaging discussion, she said, settling into the empty chair beside me. Please, don't stop on my account. Terrence's expression shifted instantly, smile widening as he straightened his posture. Just discussing organizational priorities, Imani. I gathered that much, she replied, unwrapping her silverware. She turned to me. Is that analysis ready for review? I nodded. Completed this morning. Excellent. Let's discuss it tomorrow, she said. Both of you should attend. After she left, Terrence's eyebrows furrowed. What analysis? I gathered my things and stood. Just some numbers you might find interesting. Before I share what happened next, I want to confess something. Many of you are listening to stories like mine but leaving without subscribing or dropping a like. I get it. We're all busy. But if this story resonates with you, if you've ever felt undervalued or pushed aside, I hope you'll stay with me until the end and consider subscribing. Because what happened after that lunch changed everything. Not just for me, but for an entire company. My name is Merritt. Until that day in the cafeteria, I'd spent 18 months as a market research specialist at a mid-sized tech consulting firm. I joined the company with specialized expertise in emerging markets and genuine enthusiasm for our industry. The first week had been promising. Terrence welcomed me with team introductions and encouraging words about my potential. 15 days later, I watched silently from the back row as he presented my comprehensive market expansion strategy to leadership, without once mentioning my contribution. When I questioned him privately about it afterward, he chuckled. Consider it part of your orientation, he said, arranging papers on his desk without looking up. Ideas move upward. Credit stays with management. That's how corporate ladder climbing works. This became my daily reality. My research appeared in his presentations without acknowledgement. My client solutions were attributed to his department leadership. During performance reviews, he cited my insufficient initiative while awarding minimal raises. I wasn't alone. Faye's innovative customer retention program became Terrence's brainchild. Ash's coding solutions were developed under close management guidance. We became a team united by shared resentment, whispering in break rooms, exchanging knowing glances during meetings. I contemplated resignation weekly, updating my resume during lunch breaks, browsing job listings after hours. But the reality of student loans and a struggling economy kept me in place. That and something else, a hardening resolve. The situation deteriorated when our industry hit turbulence. 2 competitors shuttered their doors. Another was acquired and gutted. Whispers of cutbacks spread through our hallways. Terrence began excluding me from critical client meetings, then assigning me the resulting projects without context, setting impossible deadlines. Missing deadlines reflects poorly during budget reviews, he reminded me, with that same smirk from the cafeteria. One evening, working late to salvage a project I'd been given only partial information about, I spotted Imani in the break room. She stood alone, studying sales projections with concern. Those metrics tell half the story, I said before wisdom could stop me. She looked up, expression unreadable. Explain. Instead of retreating, I grabbed a napkin and sketched an alternative framework. We're measuring what's easy to count, not what actually matters to our sustainability. These three factors are more predictive of future performance. To my surprise, she asked thoughtful questions. For 20 minutes, we rethought our approach to market evaluation. As I turned to leave, she asked, "Why haven't these insights reached me before now?" The question cracked open a door. I provided a careful but honest account of information flow within our department. Her expression revealed nothing, but before leaving, she requested a comprehensive analysis, kept strictly between us. For weeks afterward, I maintained parallel work streams, completing Terrence's assigned tasks, while secretly compiling a diagnostic of company operations. I interviewed clients during lunch breaks. I analyzed industry patterns after hours. I identified structural problems and outlined potential solutions. Terrence sensed the shift in my focus. His criticism intensified. The replaceable comment wasn't random. He'd been positioning me for removal for weeks. What he didn't know was that I'd been positioning myself too. The morning after the cafeteria incident, I arrived at the conference room for my meeting with Imani to find Terrence already there, looking self-assured. "Perfect timing," Imani said as I entered. "I was just explaining to Terrence about an extraordinary analysis I received." Terrence nodded confidently. "My department prides itself on thoroughness." Imani opened a folder. "This work identifies three fundamental failures within our organization." She slid the document, my analysis, across the table. First, our decision paths are needlessly complex. Second, our compensation doesn't align with contribution. Third, she fixed her gaze on Terrence. "We have patterns of idea appropriation that violate our ethics policy." His smile faltered. "That seems rather subjective. The report includes original submissions, presentation slides, and meeting transcripts showing systematic misattribution." She interrupted. "The evidence spans 18 months and affects multiple employees." What followed stunned even me. Imani outlined a complete company restructuring that eliminated traditional management layers, including Terrence's position. "We're evolving beyond hierarchical thinking," she explained. "We need solution creators, not gatekeepers." Terrence's jaw tightened. "After 8 years of service, you have two options," she stated firmly. "Apply for one of the new specialist positions, where performance is transparently measured, or accept separation compensation." He gestured toward me without making eye contact. "And her? Merit will be developing our innovation division." Terrence's face drained of color. His fingers curled into fists beneath the table. For a moment, I thought he might explode. "I'll need your decision by Friday," Imani concluded, standing to signal the meeting's end. After she left, Terrence remained seated, staring at the wall. I gathered my notes, uncertain what to say or if I should say anything at all. "You planned this," he finally said, voice low. "You went around me." I paused at the door. "I simply did my job thoroughly." "This isn't over," he replied. "People like you don't win against people like me." "That's exactly the problem," I said. "It shouldn't be about winning. It should be about value creation." His laugh was hollow. "Keep believing that fairy tale." I almost walked away then, but turned back. "I'm curious, why did you hire me if you were just going to take credit for my work?" He finally looked at me, expression cold. "Because people with your skills make useful stepping stones." The restructuring announcement went out company-wide that afternoon. Reactions were mixed. Anxiety from those comfortable with traditional hierarchies, excitement from those who'd felt stifled. I received 28 messages within the first hour, most expressing congratulations, some seeking reassurance. Faye burst into my office, closing the door behind her. "Is this real? Tell me this is real." "It's real," I confirmed, and unsettling and exciting and terrifying all at once. "What happens to Terrence?" "He can apply for a specialist position or take severance," she laughed. "Can you imagine him actually doing work instead of just claiming credit for it?" I couldn't answer. Despite everything, watching someone's carefully constructed world collapse brought no joy, but neither did it bring regret. The next week was chaos. Imani appointed me interim transition lead while formal structures were established. Terrence stopped coming to the office, communicating only through terse emails about his decision to accept severance. Other managers reacted differently. Some embraced the change, others resigned, a few fought it. Late Friday, as I was reviewing transition plans, my office phone rang. "You've destroyed everything," Terrence said without introduction. "Years of building this department, all undone by your little power play." "This isn't about power," I replied. "It's about recognizing contribution. It's about revenge," he snapped. "Don't pretend otherwise." After he hung up, I sat in silence, questioning my motives. Was it revenge? Partly, perhaps. But it was also about building something better. A company where ideas flowed freely, where contribution earned recognition, where collaboration replaced competition. 3 months later, our transformed company showed promising results. Teams self-organized around client needs rather than management preferences. Innovation accelerated. Employee satisfaction scores rose dramatically. My innovation division expanded from 3 people to 12. Then came a moment I hadn't anticipated. Ash burst into my office one morning, tablet in hand. "You need to see this," he said, placing it before me. Terrence just announced his new position. The screen showed a professional networking post. Terrence smiling beside the CEO of our largest competitor, announcing his role as their new chief strategy officer. "He's going to use everything he knows about our restructuring against us," Ash warned. I stared at the image, at Terrence's triumphant smile. The competitor had been struggling, but with our internal knowledge, they could potentially leapfrog our innovations. "Should we tell Imani?" Ash asked. Before I could answer, my phone chimed with a message from Terrence himself. "Stepping stones work both ways. See you in the marketplace." That night, I couldn't sleep. The restructuring had been working, teams collaborating effectively, innovative solutions emerging naturally, client satisfaction improving. But Terrence knew our weaknesses, our plans, our client relationships. He'd been in every strategic meeting for years. More troubling was the realization that Terrence's approach, taking credit, positioning others as stepping stones, had indeed advanced his career. He'd failed upward into an executive role at a major competitor. The system I wanted to change had rewarded him again. The next morning, I requested a meeting with Imani. Her assistant scheduled it for 7 a.m. the following day. Never a good sign. "You've seen the announcement," she said when I entered her office. I nodded. "I'm concerned about the competitive implications." "As am I." She gestured toward a chair. "But I'm more concerned about your reaction." "My reaction? Will you let this derail everything we've built?" she asked. "Because that's exactly what he wants." Her directness caught me off guard. "I'm not sure what you mean." "When people like Terrence lose, they want everyone else to lose too. The question is whether you'll give him that satisfaction." I hadn't expected this perspective. "What do you suggest?" She leaned forward. "We accelerate. We innovate faster than he can copy. We build stronger client relationships than he can damage. We create a company so fundamentally different that his old knowledge becomes obsolete. And if we can't, then we failed because we built something fragile, not because Terrence knew our secrets." She smiled slightly, but I don't think that's the case. As I left her office, my phone chimed with another message from Terrence. "First client meeting today. Your former accounts seem very interested in hearing about leadership changes." The taunt was clear. He planned to poach our clients by sowing doubt about our new structure. I started to type a response, then deleted it. Engaging would only validate his approach. Instead, I called an emergency meeting with our client services team. "We need to reach out to every account today, not defensively, but to reinforce the benefits they're already seeing from our restructuring." By noon, we'd contacted half our client list. By end of day, we'd reached them all. The response was overwhelmingly positive. Clients had noticed improved responsiveness, creative solutions, and greater transparency under our new model. That evening, I received an unexpected call from Arnie, our largest client's procurement director. "Interesting lunch today," he said. "Your former colleague made some concerning claims about instability at your company." My heart sank. "I'm sorry to hear that." "Don't be," Arnie chuckled. His approach was so transparently self-serving that it backfired. He kept referring to "my clients" and "my strategies" when discussing work we know came from your team. What did you tell him? That we value partnership over personality, that results speak louder than resumes, and that we're quite happy with our current arrangement. He paused. Though he did make a compelling offer on pricing, the implication was clear. They were satisfied but open to negotiation. I took a deep breath. Arnie, I won't play pricing games. What I will do is invite you to our innovation lab next week. See what we're building, meet the actual creators, and then decide if what we offer brings sufficient value. The silence stretched long enough that I thought the call had dropped. That, he finally said, is exactly why we'll stay with your company. Over the next week, 3 more clients reported similar experiences. Terrence was making aggressive moves, but our transparent approach was resonating more strongly than his promises. Then came the first test of our new model. A potential client, larger than any we'd worked with previously, requested proposals from both our company and Terrence's for a major international project. This is it, Faye said during our planning session. Direct competition. Us versus him. No, I corrected. Not us versus him. Our approach versus theirs. This isn't personal. But despite my words, it felt intensely personal. Terrence had messaged again. Enjoy competing against someone who knows all your tricks. Some things never change. The best strategist still wins. The team worked through weekends to develop our proposal. Rather than the traditional approach, a polished presentation concealing implementation details, we created an open book proposal outlining our thinking process, acknowledging challenges, and demonstrating collaborative problem solving. The presentation day arrived. As we set up in the client's conference room, the door opened and Terrence walked in with his team. He faltered momentarily upon seeing me, then recovered with a broad smile. Merritt, he said loudly, extending his hand. How nice to see you still with the company. I shook his hand briefly. Looking forward to an interesting discussion today. His team presented first, a slick, confident display of market understanding and strategic thinking, much of it eerily familiar to approaches developed in my innovation lab. Terrence frequently referred to my strategic framework and my implementation methodology. When our turn came, I began differently. Before we start, I want to acknowledge something. You'll notice similarities between our approach and what you just heard. That's because these ideas were developed by some of the same people. The difference is who gets to present them today. Terrence's face darkened. I continued, in our company, the people who create the solutions are the ones who share them with you. So today, you won't primarily hear from me. You'll hear directly from the specialists who would serve your account. One by one, our team members presented their components. Faye on customer engagement, Ash on technical implementation, Wyatt on market positioning, Darcy on regulatory compliance. The client team asked challenging questions, which our specialists answered with confidence and candor, occasionally consulting with each other when a question crossed domains. When the client's chief innovation officer asked about risk factors, I didn't intercept the question. Darcy candidly identified 3 potential challenges and outlined our contingency approaches. As we concluded, the CIO leaned forward. I'm curious. Your team openly acknowledged limitations and challenges. Most firms present only certainties. We believe pretending to have all answers creates more risk than acknowledging uncertainty. I replied. We've found transparent collaboration leads to better outcomes than confident directives. The client team exchanged glances. Thank you all. We'll be in touch within the week. Outside the building, Terrence caught up with me in the parking lot. Cute stunt in there, positioning yourselves as the honest underdogs. It wasn't a stunt, I replied, continuing toward my car. He kept pace beside me. You still don't get it, do you? Clients don't want collaboration. They want confidence. They want someone who'll take responsibility. I stopped walking. Taking responsibility isn't the same as taking credit. Semantics, he scoffed. You'll see when they announce their decision. 3 days later, the client called. They'd selected our company for the project, the largest in our history. The deciding factor, they said, was our collaborative approach and transparent acknowledgement of challenges. That afternoon, a company-wide email announced our success. The project would expand our international presence and validate our restructured approach. The celebration spread across departments. As I returned to my office after an impromptu gathering, I found a note on my desk. No name, but I recognized the handwriting immediately. Enjoy your moment, but remember, markets change, clients are fickle, and novelty wears off. The real world rewards strength, not collaboration. We'll revisit this conversation in 6 months. I stared at the note, feeling that familiar tightness in my chest that Terrence always managed to trigger. 6 months. A challenge and a threat wrapped into one. I considered shredding it, but instead tucked it into my desk drawer. Sometimes we need reminders of where we've been to appreciate how far we've come. The international project launched the following week. Our collaborative model faced its first major test, coordinating specialists across time zones without traditional management hierarchies. The client assigned Lark, their demanding international director, as our primary contact. Her reputation for exhaustive questioning and skepticism preceded her. During our kickoff video call, she wasted no time addressing her concerns. "Your structure intrigues me," she said, tapping a pen against her notepad. "But I worry about accountability. When problems arise, and they will, who takes responsibility if there's no traditional manager?" "We all do," I explained. "Responsibility is distributed, not delegated. Each specialist owns their component, but we collectively own the outcome." She leaned closer to the camera. "And when your specialists disagree, who breaks the tie?" "The client's best interest breaks the tie," I replied. "We document disagreements, evaluate options against client goals, and proceed with what best serves those goals." Lark's expression remained skeptical. Theoretical responses. "Let's see how it functions under pressure." Pressure came sooner than expected. 2 weeks into the project, a regulatory change in one of our target markets threatened to derail our entire implementation timeline. In the traditional model, Terrence would have made a unilateral decision, likely concealing the full implications from the client until forced to reveal them. Instead, our team collaborated on 3 potential approaches, transparently presented them to Lark with their respective trade-offs, and implemented her selected direction. The problem was solved within days rather than becoming a month-long crisis. After the regulatory hurdle, Lark's skepticism began softening. She started engaging directly with our specialists rather than routing everything through me. The project gained momentum. Weekly metrics showed we were exceeding targets despite the early setback. Then came the email I'd been half expecting, half dreading. A message from Kieran, our client's founder, forwarding correspondence from Terrence. "I thought you should see this. Your competitor seems quite interested in our project." The attached message from Terrence claimed insider knowledge about our implementation difficulties and offered to rescue the project at a reduced fee. He detailed supposed weaknesses in our approach that only someone with internal knowledge could know or convincingly fabricate. I called Kieran immediately. "I apologize for this situation. Our former colleague is—" "No need to explain," Kieran interrupted. "Lark has kept me well informed about your actual progress. I found his email interesting primarily for what it reveals about his character." I exhaled slowly. "Thank you for your understanding. Transparency builds trust, Merritt. Your team has been refreshingly honest about both successes and challenges. That's far more valuable than promises from someone willing to undermine former colleagues." After the call, I forwarded the exchange to Amani with a brief note. "FYI, Terrence actively attempting to poach clients using internal knowledge. Client response attached." Her reply came minutes later. "Not surprised. Our best defense remains consistent delivery, though legal may want to review his employment terms regarding confidentiality." End quote. 3 months into the project, our restructured approach was proving remarkably effective. Innovation happened faster without management bottlenecks. Client satisfaction scores reached unprecedented levels. Team members reported greater job satisfaction despite working harder than before. The media noticed. An industry publication requested an interview about our revolutionary management experiment. The resulting article sparked conversations across our sector about alternative organizational models. The day after publication, I received another message from Terrence. "Enjoying your 15 minutes? Novelty makes for good articles, but poor business models. Our Q2 numbers come out next week. Compare them to yours before celebrating too much." I didn't respond. Our numbers would speak for themselves. And they did. Our quarterly results showed 23% growth compared to their 14%. More telling was employee retention. We'd lost only 2 people since restructuring, while industry sources indicated Terrence's company was experiencing significant turnover. 5 months into our international project, 1 month before Terrence's self-imposed deadline, I received an unexpected visit. Wyatt knocked on my office door, expression unusually serious. "Someone's waiting to see you in the lobby," he said. "Darcy from Terrence's team." Darcy had been Terrence's executive assistant for years, instrumental in his day-to-day operations. We'd never been close, but she'd always treated me with professional courtesy. I found her sitting tensely in our reception area, clutching her handbag. When she saw me, she stood quickly. "Is there somewhere we can talk privately?" she asked, voice low. I led her to a small conference room and closed the door. "What brings you here, Darcy?" She placed her handbag on the table, hands trembling slightly. "I shouldn't be doing this. If Terrence found out, whatever you share stays between us," I assured her. She took a deep breath. "Terrence has been systematically targeting your clients, not just competing for business, actively working to undermine your relationships. We've noticed," I acknowledged. "It's worse than you think. He's created a dedicated team focused solely on identifying weaknesses in your projects. They're instructed to watch for any implementation hiccups and immediately reach out to those clients with rescue offers." While concerning, this wasn't entirely surprising. "Why are you telling me this?" Darcy's eyes met mine. "Because it's not just business for him. It's personal. In management meetings, he talks about destroying you specifically. He's convinced you deliberately sabotaged his career. I simply provided factual information," I countered. "I know that," she said. "I processed your reports for years. I saw how he took credit for your work." She hesitated. "There's more. He's preparing something big against your international project. I don't know details, but he called it his checkmate move." My mind raced through possibilities. What could he possibly do to derail a successfully progressing project? "Why are you risking your position to tell me this?" I asked. Darcy looked down at her hands. "Last week, my mother needed emergency surgery. I requested 2 days off. Terrence denied it, saying, 'Personal problems can't interfere with business priorities.' I went anyway. When I returned, I found I'd been demoted." Her voice hardened. "He built his career taking credit for others' work. Now he's building his company the same way." After Darcy left, I called an emergency meeting with our international project team. Without revealing my source, I shared that we should prepare for potential disruption. "What kind of disruption?" Faye asked. "Unknown. But knowing Terrence, it will target what he perceives as our greatest vulnerability." Ash leaned forward. "Which is?" I considered this carefully. "Our transparency. He believes it makes us vulnerable because we acknowledge challenges rather than hiding them." "So, we prepare by being even more transparent?" Wyatt sounded skeptical. "Exactly," I replied. "We proactively identify every potential issue, however minor, and share them with the client before Terrence can use them against us." For the next week, our team conducted exhaustive reviews of every project component, documenting potential weaknesses and developing contingency plans. We scheduled a comprehensive update with Lark and Kieran to share our findings. The night before the presentation, I worked late, refining our approach. As I was preparing to leave, my office phone rang. A number I didn't recognize. "Is this Merritt?" a woman's voice asked. "Yes, who's calling?" "My name is Vima. I'm Chief Legal Counsel at Northstar Partners." My pulse quickened. Northstar was one of the largest investment firms in our sector, known for strategic acquisitions. "I apologize for calling after hours," she continued, "but we've just received some concerning information about your company that requires immediate attention." "What information?" "A detailed dossier suggesting your recent restructuring has created significant legal exposure. It includes internal documents, client communications, and financial projections suggesting imminent instability." Terrence's checkmate move suddenly became clear. He wasn't just targeting our clients. He was attempting to devalue our entire company. "The materials are compelling enough that our acquisition committee has paused consideration of your company," Vima continued. We were planning to approach with an offer next quarter. I hadn't known we were even on their radar. These materials were provided by a competitor, I assume? I'm not at liberty to disclose the source, she replied diplomatically. But yes, someone with an obvious interest in affecting our perception of your company. I'd like the opportunity to address these concerns directly, I said. The information you've received is from a former manager who was separated during our restructuring. That context is helpful, Vima acknowledged. Are you available to meet tomorrow? Absolutely. After arranging details, I immediately called Imani, explaining the situation. So that's his play, she said thoughtfully. Not attacking the project, but undermining our company valuation. Clever. What's our response? I asked. Complete transparency, as always, she replied. Prepare a full disclosure package, the good, the bad, and the uncertain. Include our contingency plans for various scenarios, and bring Faye with you to the meeting. Her financial analysis will be crucial. The next morning, Faye and I arrived at Northstar's impressive downtown offices. Vima greeted us in the lobby, escorting us to a conference room where 4 other executives waited. Their expressions ranged from curious to skeptical. Thank you for meeting on such short notice, I began. Before addressing specific concerns, I'd like to provide context about our company's transformation. For the next hour, Faye and I walked them through our restructuring journey, the challenges, the successes, and most importantly, the data supporting our approach. We directly addressed each concern raised in Terrence's dossier, neither minimizing legitimate issues nor accepting mischaracterizations. When we finished, the room remained silent for several moments. Finally, Northstar's acquisition director spoke. This is the most forthright pre-acquisition discussion I've experienced in 20 years. Most companies spend months hiding problems we eventually discover anyway. Hiding problems doesn't solve them, I replied. We prefer focusing energy on solutions rather than concealment. Your competitor painted quite a different picture, Vima noted. I imagine he did, I acknowledged. He represents a traditional management approach that values hierarchy over contribution. We've chosen a different path. The acquisition director nodded slowly. We'll need time to reconsider our position, but I appreciate your candor today. As we left the building, Faye grabbed my arm excitedly. Did you catch that? Reconsider our position. They're still interested. Maybe, I cautioned. But that wasn't our primary goal. We needed to neutralize Terrence's attack, not secure an acquisition. Still, Faye insisted. It's a powerful validation of our approach. She was right. Even without an acquisition offer, having Northstar's interest confirmed our model's viability. It wasn't just working. It was attracting serious attention. That afternoon, we presented our comprehensive risk assessment to Lark and Kieran. Their response exceeded expectations. This level of proactive disclosure is unprecedented, Kieran said. Most firms only reveal problems after they've become crises. Precisely why we chose your company, Lark added, her earlier skepticism completely gone. This approach significantly reduces our overall project risk. By day's end, not only had we neutralized Terrence's potential disruption, we'd strengthened both client relationships and acquisition interest. I returned to my office feeling cautiously optimistic. A notification chimed on my computer. An email from Terrence, sent just minutes ago. Heard you had an interesting meeting today. Don't celebrate yet. You've survived the opening moves, but the game continues. 6-month deadline still stands. I closed the email without responding. His chess metaphors were growing tiresome. This wasn't a game with artificial rules and boundaries. This was about creating sustainable value versus extracting personal gain. The following week brought unexpected news. Northstar Partners announced a major investment in our company. Not a full acquisition, but a strategic partnership that would accelerate our international expansion. The press release specifically cited our innovative organizational model as a key factor in their decision. Hours after the announcement, I received a text message from an unknown number. This changes nothing. But it had changed everything. Northstar's investment validated our approach industry-wide. Our stock price jumped. Potential clients reached out, intrigued by our restructured model. The The very thing Terrence had attempted to undermine had become our greatest market differentiator. Exactly 6 months after his note, I received a meeting request from a competitor. Not Terrence's company, but another major player in our industry. Curious, I accepted. Their CEO, Eliza, came directly to the point. We're interested in acquiring your innovative division. We're not looking to sell, I replied. Everyone has a price, she countered. And frankly, we're concerned about your competitive impact if we don't bring you into our fold. Meaning you'd rather acquire our approach than compete against it. She smiled thinly. Precisely. Innovation is valuable. Disruptive innovation is priceless. I appreciate your interest, I said, but we're committed to our independence. As she was leaving, Eliza paused. I should mention, we're also in talks with Terrence's company about a potential merger. He suggested your division might be more acquisition-friendly than you're indicating. The implications were clear. Terrence was positioning himself for a potential takeover of our division through a third-party merger. If successful, he would effectively become my boss again. I reported the conversation to Imani immediately. This confirms our market impact, she noted. When competitors try to acquire you, you're doing something right. She leaned back in her chair. But Terrence's involvement complicates things. He's still trying to undermine us, I agreed, just through increasingly sophisticated means. Imani studied me thoughtfully. After everything that's happened, I'm curious. What do you want the end result to be with Terrence? The question caught me off guard. I'd been so focused on defending against his attacks that I hadn't considered my ultimate goal. I want him to stop interfering with our business, I began. I want our model to succeed despite his efforts to undermine it. I paused, considering more deeply. But what I really want is vindication. Not just personal vindication, but validation that our approach creates more value than his extractive model. Imani nodded. Then perhaps it's time we stop playing defense. What do you mean? For months, we've been reacting to Terrence's moves. Maybe it's time we made our own. She smiled. Your revenge shouldn't be about destroying Terrence. It should be about building something so successful that his approach becomes obsolete. The idea resonated deeply. True vindication wouldn't come from Terrence's failure, but from our success becoming undeniable, even to him. Over the next weeks, we accelerated our innovation initiatives while monitoring merger discussions between Terrence's company and Eliza's. Our international project neared successful completion. Client testimonials poured in, validating our collaborative approach. Our stock continued climbing while our competition struggled with retention issues. Then came news that changed the landscape entirely. Terrence's company announced a merger with Eliza's, a move that would create the largest firm in our sector. Market analysts praised the combined entity's potential to dominate the industry. Terrence's message arrived minutes after the announcement. Checkmate. For a moment, doubt crept in. Had he won after all? The merged company would have resources and market position we couldn't match. Perhaps the traditional model would prevail simply through consolidation and market power. I was still processing this when Imani called an emergency leadership meeting. Her expression was uncharacteristically animated as we gathered. The merger announcement changes everything, she began. They'll be formidable competitors, Faye acknowledged. That's not what I mean, Imani replied. Look deeper at the announcement details. Terrence isn't taking the CEO position. He's being named Chief Strategy Officer. Eliza remains CEO. So? Ash asked. So, the power dynamics are clear, Imani explained. Eliza acquired his company, not the other way around. She's the decision maker. I began to see her direction, and Eliza approached us first. Exactly, Imani smiled. She values our innovation model. Now she's acquired a company with traditional hierarchy. The cultures will inevitably clash, creating an opportunity, I continued, for us to demonstrate which model produces better results. Precisely. Imani distributed folders to each of us. This is our response to the merger. Review it tonight. We implement tomorrow. Inside my folder was a comprehensive plan titled Open Innovation Initiative. Rather than competing directly against the newly merged giant, we would transform into a completely open organization, sharing our methods, publishing our results, and inviting industry participation in collaborative projects. The approach was counterintuitive yet brilliant. Instead of fighting for market share, we would become the industry's innovation engine. Our competitors could either adopt our collaborative methods or risk falling behind as the market evolved around them. The plan included a dramatic announcement. We would open source our organizational model, providing detailed implementation guides for any company wanting to restructure. We would offer transition consulting to help traditional companies evolve. We would create an industry consortium dedicated to collaborative innovation. As I read further, I understood the genius of Imani's strategy. By open sourcing our approach, we would accelerate industry transformation toward the very model Terrence had fought against. His merger victory would become hollow as the market itself evolved beyond his traditional paradigm. This wasn't just about our company versus his anymore. This was about reshaping an entire industry. The next morning, I found a package on my desk, a small wooden box containing a chess piece, a white queen with a note attached. Sometimes the most powerful move isn't capturing your opponent's pieces, but changing the nature of the game. Imani. I placed the queen on my desk as we finalized our announcement. By afternoon, our Open Innovation Initiative hit the newswires. The market response was immediate and overwhelming. Our stock jumped 28% by closing bell. Industry publications scrambled for interviews. Competing companies, including smaller firms threatened by the merger, reached out about joining our consortium. But the response I awaited most came the following day, a message request from an unknown profile on a professional networking site. I accepted, revealing a direct message from Terrence. "What exactly do you think you're accomplishing with this publicity stunt?" For the first time in our long conflict, I felt no anxiety reading his words, only clarity. I replied, "Creating an industry where everyone can contribute their best work and be recognized for it, where ideas flow freely instead of being captured for personal advancement, where collaboration creates more value than competition." His response came quickly. "Idealistic nonsense. Business isn't about making everyone feel valued. It's about results." "I agree completely about results," I wrote back, "which is why our next announcement might interest you." "What announcement?" I didn't reply. He would find out with everyone else tomorrow. That night, I could barely sleep, anticipating what was coming. Our plan's next phase was the boldest yet, and the one most likely to finally break Terrence's certainty about his approach. Morning arrived with a flurry of preparation. At precisely 9 a.m., Imani stepped onto the stage at our hastily arranged press conference. Camera flashes punctuated her opening remarks about industry transformation and collaborative potential. Then she revealed our bombshell. "Today, we're announcing the Transparent Performance Initiative. Beginning next quarter, we will publicly publish side-by-side comparisons of project outcomes under traditional management versus collaborative models. We've already secured participation from 12 companies across the industry spectrum." Reporters erupted with questions. Imani held up her hand for silence. "But the most significant participant," she continued, "confirmed just this morning. Eliza Nowen, CEO of the newly merged Pinnacle Astral Group, has committed their organization to this transparent comparison." The room exploded with activity. This was unprecedented, a direct, public performance comparison between competing organizational models. I watched from offstage, imagining Terrence's reaction. Eliza had committed his company without consulting him, a clear indication of the actual power dynamics in their merger. His traditional approach would now be measured directly against our collaborative model, with results published for the entire industry to see. As the press conference concluded, my phone vibrated with an incoming call. Terrence. I stepped into a quiet corner before answering. "Hello, Terrence. What have you done?" His voice trembled with barely controlled rage. "Eliza had no right to commit us to this ridiculous comparison." "Actually, as CEO, she has every right," I replied calmly. "That's how traditional hierarchy works, isn't it? Decisions flow from the top." "This is about revenge," he hissed. "You've manipulated this entire situation." "No, Terrence. This is about accountability and transparency. Two things you've spent your career avoiding." The line went silent for several seconds. "You think you've won," he finally said, "but you're forgetting something crucial. I know how to work within a hierarchical system." I know how to ensure my division outperforms yours, regardless of your fancy collaborative approach. That's exactly the point, I replied. If your traditional model genuinely produces better results, you should welcome this comparison. Unless, I paused, unless you're not actually confident in your approach. This conversation is over, he snapped. I'll see you in the performance rankings. The line went dead. I pocketed my phone, feeling neither triumph nor anxiety, only certainty that the real test was finally beginning. 6 weeks after the announcement, implementation teams from both companies met to establish measurement protocols. Terrence attended, uncharacteristically subdued. The merger was clearly proving more challenging than anticipated, with reports of significant internal conflicts between the combining cultures. As the meeting concluded, Terrence approached me. This little experiment won't prove what you think it will. It's not about proving anything, I replied. It's about learning what actually works best. He laughed hollowly. Still clinging to your idealism, he lowered his voice. But know this, I haven't forgotten who started this conflict. Your transparency crusade destroyed my career trajectory. Whatever happens with this comparison, that debt remains unpaid. As he walked away, I realized something important. Despite everything, Terrence still viewed our situation through the lens of personal competition rather than organizational effectiveness. He couldn't separate his ego from his business approach. And that, I suddenly understood, was his fundamental weakness. The first quarterly comparison results were scheduled for release in exactly 1 month. Both companies were implementing similar projects for different clients, with agreed-upon metrics for evaluation. The industry waited with collective breath held. In the meantime, our Open Innovation Initiative gained momentum. 23 companies had joined our consortium. Our training programs for collaborative restructuring had waiting lists. The industry was evolving rapidly, with or without Terrence's participation. 1 week before the results announcement, I received an unexpected visitor. Eliza requested a private meeting, arriving at our offices late evening after most staff had departed. I'll be direct, she said once we were seated in my office. The comparison results are troubling for our traditional divisions. I waited silently. Terrence's department is significantly underperforming compared to your collaborative teams, she continued. Client satisfaction, innovation metrics, implementation timelines, all favor your approach. That aligns with our experience, I acknowledged. The problem, she sighed, is that Terrence is attempting to manipulate the results. He's pressuring project managers to adjust timelines, revise client feedback, and modify resource allocations retroactively. This wasn't entirely surprising, but her willingness to disclose it was. Why are you telling me this? Eliza leaned forward. Because I didn't merge with his company to preserve an outdated management model. I did it to acquire market share while transitioning to a more effective approach. Your approach. And Terrence is resisting that transition. Vehemently, she confirmed. He views it as personal vindication or failure rather than organizational evolution. I considered the implications. What do you need from me? Partnership, she replied. Not competition. I want our company to evolve toward your collaborative model with your consortium's guidance. But first, I need to address the Terrence situation. How can I help? She smiled slightly. By doing nothing. Let the unmodified comparison results publish as scheduled. The data speaks for itself. After she left, I sat alone in my office, contemplating the conversation. Terrence's resistance to change wasn't just about me anymore. It was becoming a liability to his own company. His focus on winning our personal battle was causing him to lose the larger war. The morning the comparison results were scheduled for release, I arrived early to find an urgent message from Darcy. Emergency at Terrence's office. Come quickly if you can. Back entrance. Concerned and curious, I drove to their headquarters. Darcy met me at a service door, expression tense. Thank you for coming, she whispered, leading me through back corridors. Terrence had a complete meltdown when he saw the final comparison report. He's been here all night trying to revise the numbers. Why did you call me? She stopped outside a conference room door. Because what's happening in there needs a witness besides me. Through the door's window, I could see Terrence facing Eliza and 2 board members. His face was flushed, hands gesticulating wildly. Eliza's expression remained impassive. Darcy handed me an earpiece connected to the room's audio system. Security monitoring, she explained. I have access codes from managing Terrence's meetings. I hesitated, uncomfortable with eavesdropping. But Darcy's expression was urgent. Please, this affects more than just Terrence. I inserted the earpiece, catching Terrence mid-sentence. Deliberately sabotaged by collaborative teams, these results are meaningless without context. Eliza's voice was calm. The methodology was agreed upon by both companies. The metrics were established collaboratively. Every project had independent verification. It's too soon for meaningful comparison, Terrence insisted. Traditional approaches show their value over longer time frames. That wasn't your position when we agreed to the comparison, one board member noted. And it contradicts your own previous claims about quick wins from hierarchical efficiency, added the other. Terrence's voice lowered. This is a personal vendetta. Merit has manipulated this entire situation to discredit me. This isn't about merit, Eliza replied firmly. This is about organizational effectiveness. The data is clear. Collaborative teams are outperforming traditional hierarchies across every meaningful metric. Give me 6 more months, Terrence pleaded. I can turn these numbers around. We're not suppressing the report, Terrence, Eliza stated. The industry is watching. Transparency was the point of this initiative. His voice hardened. Then you leave me no choice. I'll release my own analysis showing the methodological flaws. That would violate your employment agreement, one board member warned. I don't care, Terrence shouted, slamming his hand on the table. I won't let her win. The room fell silent. Her? Eliza finally asked. This is about beating merit, not about what's best for our company or clients? Terrence seemed to realize his mistake. That's not what I meant. I think it's exactly what you meant, Eliza interrupted, and it clarifies several decisions you've made recently. She exchanged glances with the board members, who nodded slightly. Terrence, we're releasing the comparison report as scheduled, and effective immediately, we're restructuring your division. What does that mean? His voice had lost its force. It means your position as Chief Strategy Officer no longer exists. We're implementing collaborative teams across all divisions, including yours. You can't do this, he whispered. Actually, I can, Eliza replied. The board unanimously approved the restructuring last night after reviewing the comparison data. I removed the earpiece, having heard enough. Through the window, I could see Terrence slumped in his chair, defeat evident in every line of his body. Darcy touched my arm. We should go before he comes out. As we hurried toward the exit, I asked, why did you want me to witness that? She stopped at the door. Because you needed to see it wasn't just about winning or losing. It was about creating something better. She smiled slightly. You changed an industry by focusing on creation rather than competition. He destroyed his career by doing the opposite. I nodded, understanding completely. Thank you, Darcy. No, she replied. Thank you for showing there's a better way to work. The comparison report published that afternoon, sending shockwaves through the industry. Collaborative teams had outperformed traditional hierarchies by significant margins across all key metrics. More significantly, employee satisfaction and retention rates were dramatically higher in collaborative environments. That evening, as our team celebrated the validation of our approach, I received one final message from Terrence. Congratulations, you won. But remember, businesses are fickle. Today's innovation is tomorrow's outdated approach. This isn't over. For the first time, I felt only compassion reading his words. He still didn't understand. This had never been about winning or losing. It had never been about him versus me. It had been about creating a better way to work, one that recognized contribution, fostered innovation, and valued people as creators rather than resources. My revenge wasn't destroying Terrence. It was building something better than what he represented, something that made his approach obsolete, not through competition, but through evolution. I typed a final reply. You're right about one thing. It's not over. But that's because transformation never ends. There's always something better to build. I hope you find a way to be part of it rather than fighting against it. 6 months later, our collaborative model had become the industry standard. Our consortium had grown to include 67 companies. Terrence had disappeared from the professional landscape, declining interview requests and maintaining no public presence. Until the day I received an unexpected email. Coffee? I have a proposition to discuss. Terrence. Curiosity won over caution. I agreed to meet Terrence at a quiet cafe downtown. When I arrived, I almost didn't recognize him. Gone was the expensive watch, the tailored suit, the practiced confidence. Instead, he wore casual clothes, his posture more subdued. "Thank you for coming," he said as I sat across from him. "I wasn't sure you would." "Curiosity is a powerful motivator," I replied. "What proposition could possibly interest me after everything that's happened?" He took a deep breath. "I want to join your consortium." I carefully set down my coffee cup. "You want to join the collaborative model you've spent years fighting against?" "Not as a company," he clarified. "Personally, as a consultant." "Why would we consider that?" I asked, genuinely perplexed. "Because I understand the traditional model better than anyone. I know exactly where the resistance points are, what fears drive opposition to change." He leaned forward. "I could help companies transition more effectively." I studied his face, searching for signs of deception. "This is quite a transformation." His eyes dropped to the table. "After losing my position, I did some consulting work. Traditional stuff. But clients kept asking about implementing collaborative models. They'd seen the comparison results." He smiled wryly. "I found myself studying your approach just to remain relevant. And I realized something unexpected. The collaborative model isn't just more effective, it's more sustainable. It creates healthier workplaces." He met my gaze directly. "I've spent 20 years climbing hierarchies by pushing others down. I'm tired. And I'm good at exactly one thing: understanding organizational dynamics." I remained silent, processing his words. "I'm not asking for forgiveness," he continued. "I'm asking for an opportunity to contribute meaningfully to something better than what I helped create. Why should I trust you?" "You shouldn't," he admitted. "Not yet, but you believe in giving people chances to prove their value. That's the foundation of your entire model." I considered his request carefully. The idea was either brilliant or disastrous. Terrence's intimate knowledge of traditional hierarchies could indeed be valuable for companies transitioning to collaborative structures, but his history made trust impossible. "Here's what I can offer," I finally said. "A 3-month probationary contract. You'll work with one transitioning company under phased direct supervision. No client contact without her present. Complete transparency on all communications." "Agreed," he said immediately. "And one more condition," I added. "You'll publicly document your experience. The challenges, the revelations, the mistakes, everything." His expression tightened. "You want me to publicly admit I was wrong?" "No," I corrected. "I want you to publicly share your learning journey. There's a difference." He considered this, then nodded slowly. "That's fair." As we concluded our meeting, he asked the question I'd been expecting. "What made you do it? Expose me? Change the company? Transform an industry? Was it really just about creating something better? Or was revenge part of it?" I looked at him directly. "It started with wanting justice, perhaps even revenge, but it evolved into something more important. I realized destroying you wouldn't fix the real problem. The problem was a system that rewarded taking credit over creating value." "And now?" he asked. "Now I understand my true revenge wasn't ruining your career. It was building something so fundamentally better that your approach became obsolete. I didn't need to destroy you. The market did that when given a clear choice between our models." His expression showed genuine understanding for perhaps the first time. "That's elegant. It's also more satisfying," I added, gathering my things, "because it doesn't just affect you. It helps everyone else." 6 months later, Terrence's probationary contract evolved into a permanent position. His insights proved valuable for companies struggling with transition. The public documentation of his journey became a case study in organizational transformation. The industry continued evolving. Our collaborative model expanded beyond our sector into adjacent industries. The fundamental nature of work was changing. Not everywhere, not completely, but significantly and irreversibly. My greatest revenge wasn't taking Terrence's job or destroying his career. It was creating a world where his old approach couldn't succeed and mine couldn't fail. A world where contribution matters more than position, where value creation trumps value extraction, where collaboration defeats competition. Sometimes the best revenge isn't about making someone lose. It's about changing the very definition of winning. If you've stayed with me until the end of this story, you know it's about more than workplace drama. It's about creating better systems instead of just navigating broken ones. I hope it inspires you to look at your own challenges differently. If this resonated with you, please subscribe to hear more stories about transformation and justice in unexpected forms. Because sometimes the most powerful change comes not from fighting what you hate, but from building what you believe in. He never loved you, Abby. Not the way he loved me. I was his escape, his real life. You were just convenient. Gina stood in her living room, bouncing her 1-year-old son on her hip. The birthday party guests shifted uncomfortably, conversations dying as she raised her voice. Tyler has his eyes, don't you think? His father's eyes. I felt the room spinning as 40 people, co-workers, neighbors, friends, watched me crumble. My husband had been dead for exactly 17 days. Mark wanted his son to have what was rightfully his, Gina continued, reaching into the diaper bag slung over her shoulder. She pulled out a folded document, thrusting it toward me with manicured fingers. His will. He signed it 3 months ago when he found out I was pregnant. My hands trembled as I unfolded the paper. Legal language swam before my eyes, but certain phrases stood out in stark relief. To my son, Tyler, half ownership of the property at 1542 Pinecrest Road, valued at approximately $800,000. I didn't want to do this today, Gina said, her voice dripping with false sympathy. But I thought it would be easier with everyone here to support you. I'm only asking for what belongs to Tyler. Someone gasped. A glass shattered somewhere behind me. We can be reasonable about this, she continued. You can keep living there while we sort out the details. I'll need the master bedroom, of course, and we'll have to convert your home office for Tyler's nursery. The party guests were statues now, watching this car crash in slow motion. I looked around at their faces. Horror, pity, morbid fascination. These were people I'd worked with for years. My neighbors, people who'd attended Mark's funeral, hugged me, brought casseroles to my door, and now they were witnessing my complete humiliation. I'm sure this is a shock, Gina said, adjusting Tyler on her hip. Finding out your husband had another life, another love. She smiled, a small, victorious curve of her lips. But Mark always said you were understanding, reasonable. He said that's why he married you in the first place. The document in my hands suddenly felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. The world narrowed to a pinpoint, and for a moment, I thought I might actually collapse. But something else was bubbling up beneath the shock, something that made me bite the inside of my cheek to keep from letting it show. I handed the will back to her, my face carefully blank. I see, I said quietly. Then I turned and walked out of the party without another word. No one followed me. The things people do for money, for revenge, for power, ever incredible, aren't they? If you've ever been blindsided by betrayal, hit that like button. If you've ever had to swallow your words while planning something bigger, subscribe now. And if you're wondering what happened next, keep listening. Because what Gina didn't know about me, about Mark, and about that house would change everything. My name is Abigail Preston. Abby to my friends, which suddenly seemed a much smaller circle than I'd thought. I'm 34 years old, a senior account manager at Brighton Marketing, and 17 days ago, I became a widow. And now, apparently, I was sharing my home with my husband's mistress and their child. Except I wasn't. Not by a long shot. I drove home from the party in complete silence. No radio, no phone calls, nothing but the sound of my own breathing. The sprawling craftsman house came into view as I rounded the corner. My house, with its wide porch and the maple tree I'd planted when I first moved in. 7 years ago, before I even met Mark, the house I'd bought with my inheritance when my grandparents died. The house that had only my name on the deed. I walked inside, kicked off my heels, and poured myself 3 fingers of bourbon. Then I started to laugh. It began as a chuckle, grew into a full laugh, and eventually became something close to hysteria. I laughed until tears streamed down my face and my stomach hurt, because Gina had no idea who she was dealing with. I met Mark Preston at a charity auction 4 years ago. He was charming, successful, and seemed genuinely interested in my work. We dated for 8 months before he proposed. The wedding was small, just 50 guests at a local vineyard. We honeymooned in Portugal. Life was good. Mark moved into my house after the wedding. We discussed putting his name on the deed, but I hesitated. Not because I didn't trust him, but because the house was my safety net. My grandparents had raised me after my parents died, and this house was my connection to them. My independence. Mark said he understood. Our marriage wasn't perfect. I haven't been. Whose is? But it was good. At least I thought so. He traveled often for work, sometimes gone for a week at a time. I focused on my career, working my way up from junior copywriter to senior account manager. We talked about having children someday, but agreed to wait until we were more settled. Then, 6 months ago, Mark started acting differently. He was distracted, irritable. Our conversations became shorter, more functional. He started working late, traveling more. When I asked if something was wrong, he blamed stress at work. I believed him. Or maybe I just wanted to believe him. 3 months ago, Mark died in a car accident. He was driving home late from work when his car went off the road and hit a tree. The police said he hadn't been drinking. Just tired. Maybe. A moment's inattention. That's all it takes. The funeral was a blur. I remember standing in the cemetery, watching them lower his casket, feeling hollow. Gina was there. She worked in our accounting department. I remembered thinking how kind it was that so many coworkers had come. She'd hugged me, told me how sorry she was, never mentioned a baby, never mentioned that she'd been sleeping with my husband, and now this. A first birthday party that became my public execution. My phone buzzed with a text from Amelia, my closest friend at work. "Are you okay? That was insane. Call me." I didn't respond. Instead, I went to my home office and pulled out our financial records. Mark and I had separate accounts and one joint account for household expenses. We split everything. 50-50, despite the fact that I earned more. I checked our credit card statements, bank records, everything, looking for traces of Gina, of secret gifts, hotel rooms, anything that would confirm her story. Nothing jumped out at me, but Mark had been careful. He always was. The bourbon burned pleasantly as I swallowed another sip. A plan was forming in my mind, not a confrontation. That would be too easy, too expected. No, something more intricate. Something that would give me answers while letting Gina dig her own grave. My phone rang. Amelia again. This time I answered. "What the actual hell was that?" she demanded without preamble. "I don't know," I said honestly, "but I'm going to find out. Do you think it's true?" About Mark and the baby? I stared out the window at the darkening sky. I don't know that either. But the will is fake. How can you be sure? Because the house is mine, just mine. Mark's name isn't on anything. I paused. And there's no way he wrote a will without telling me. Silence on the other end. Then, "So, what are you going to do?" I took another sip of bourbon. "Nothing. Yet." "Nothing?" "Abby, she just humiliated you in front of everyone we work with. She's claiming half your house." "I know, and she'll regret it." I set down my glass. "But first, I need to understand what game she's playing. Why now? Why like this? Because she's an opportunistic snake? Maybe. Or maybe there's something else going on." I thought for a moment. "Did you know she was pregnant? Before today?" Amelia hesitated. I heard rumors. She was on leave for a few months, came back about 6 weeks ago, but I never saw her with a baby before today. Interesting. I hadn't been paying much attention to office gossip in the months before Mark's death. And after, well, I'd taken bereavement leave. Only been back at work for a week. Abby, Amelia said hesitantly, what if the baby is Mark's? The question hung in the air between us. What if? What if my husband had been living a double life? What if he'd fathered a child with another woman while married to me? What if he'd been planning to leave me? Then I'll deal with that too, I said finally. But first, I need to know the truth. All of it. After hanging up, I poured another drink and went upstairs to our bedroom, bedroom now. I opened Mark's closet, still full of his clothes. I hadn't been able to go through them yet. The familiar scent of his cologne hit me. And for a moment, grief overwhelmed everything else. I sat on the floor, surrounded by his things, and let myself cry, for the man I thought I knew, for the life I thought we had, for the future that was gone. When the tears finally stopped, I began to search. Not just his clothes, but every pocket, every hidden corner. In the inside pocket of his winter coat, I found a small key I didn't recognize. In his bedside table, beneath a stack of magazines, a prepaid phone I'd never seen before. And in his home office, hidden in a hollowed-out business book, a small notebook filled with his handwriting. As I flipped through the pages, my heart pounded harder. Dates, times, short notes, and a name that appeared again and again, Gina. My hands trembled as I leafed through the notebook, page after page of Mark's neat handwriting, documenting meetings with Gina stretching back 14 months, coffee shops, restaurants, hotel rooms, sometimes just times and places, sometimes brief notes. G worried about work finding out. G wants more time together. G pushing for commitment. Oh, the last entry was dated just 2 weeks before his death. Told G about baby. Complicated now. I sank into his desk chair, the notebook heavy in my hands. So it was true. Or at least part of it was true. Mark and Gina had been involved. The baby might really be his. The betrayal cut deeper than I thought possible. A physical pain that radiated through my chest. But something still wasn't adding up. If Mark knew about the baby, why hadn't he said anything to me? And this will Gina was flashing around. Where had that come from? The prepaid phone I'd found was dead. I plugged it in, hands shaking as I waited for it to power on. No password required, just a list of text messages and calls, all to and from the same number. Gina's, presumably. I scrolled through the messages, each one another knife to my heart. Miss you already, she'd written. Last night was amazing, he'd replied. I forced myself to keep reading, to absorb every painful detail. The most recent messages, from 3 weeks before his death, showed a different tone. Gina, we need to talk about what happens next. I can't keep this secret much longer. Mark. I know. I'm trying to figure things out. Gina. What's there to figure out? You said you'd leave her. I'm going to say, Mark, it's complicated. Gina. The baby isn't complicated. He deserves his father. Mark. I'm not ready for this conversation over text. We'll talk in person. The final message from Gina, sent the day before his accident. I'm done waiting. Either you tell her, or I will. I sat in the growing darkness, connecting the dots. Had Mark been planning to leave me? Or had Gina pressured him into a corner he couldn't escape? And where did that fit in? My phone buzzed with an email notification. The sender, Gina Hamilton. Subject, moving forward. Abby, it read. I understand today was a shock, and I apologize for the public nature of our conversation. I thought having people around might make it easier for you. I was clearly wrong. I hope you've had time to review Mark's will. I've scheduled a meeting with my attorney next week to discuss the transfer of property. I'm willing to be reasonable about the timeline. I understand you need time to process everything. For Tyler's sake, I hope we can handle this amicably. Mark always spoke highly of your rationality. He said it was what he respected most about you. I'll be by tomorrow at 2 p.m. to discuss next steps and see the property. As you can imagine, I need to plan for my son's future. With sympathy, Gina. The audacity was breathtaking. She'd humiliated me publicly, claimed my husband had fathered her child, presented a suspicious will demanding half my house, and now expected me to welcome her with open arms. I almost admired her confidence. I didn't respond to the email. Instead, I called my own attorney, Patricia Chen, and left a message explaining the situation. Then I took the notebook, the phone, and the key and locked them in my safe. Sleep was impossible. I lay awake, replaying moments from my marriage, searching for signs I'd missed. Had Mark really been unhappy? Had I been so absorbed in my own work that I'd failed to notice him slipping away? Or had he simply been a liar, skilled at leading a double life? Morning brought no clarity, but it did bring determination. If Gina wanted to play games, she'd discover I was a formidable opponent. But first, I needed more information. I showered, dressed carefully in a blue dress that made my eyes look sharper, and drove to the office. It was Saturday, but I knew a few people would be there, catching up on work, including, I hoped, Owen from HR, who owed me a favor. The office was quiet, just a handful of cars in the parking lot. I found Owen in the break room, pouring himself coffee. "Abby." He looked startled. "I didn't expect to see you today, especially after." He trailed off, clearly uncomfortable. "After my husband's mistress announced her paternity claim at a birthday party?" "Yes. Well, life goes on." I kept my voice light, pouring myself a cup of coffee. "Actually, I could use your help with something." Owen shifted nervously. "I don't know if I should get involved in personnel records," I interrupted. "I need to know when Gina took her maternity leave." For legal purposes." "For legal purposes." He hesitated. "That's confidential information, Abby. You know I can't, remember last year when you accidentally sent that inappropriate email to the entire company instead of your girlfriend?" I took a sip of coffee. "And I helped you convince IT it was a system glitch before anyone in leadership saw it." Owen's face reddened. That's not the same thing, isn't it?" "I'm not asking for her medical records, Owen. Just dates. When she went on leave, when she returned. That's all." He sighed, shoulders slumping. "Fine. Give me a minute." 10 minutes later, I had what I needed. Gina had taken leave from November 15th to February 28th. If her son just turned 1, that meant he was born in early June, which meant conception would have been around September the previous year. I thanked Owen and left quickly, mind racing. September. Mark and I had gone to his brother's wedding in September. We'd spent a week in California. Together. The entire time, something wasn't adding up. My next stop was the county records office. I needed to confirm what I already knew, that the house was solely in my name, and see if Mark had actually filed a will. The clerk was helpful, if slow, and an hour later I had copies of my deed, sole owner, Abigail Preston, and confirmation that no will had been filed for Mark Preston. I made one more stop before heading home, a locksmith. The small key I'd found in Mark's coat. I needed to know what it opened. The older man examined it carefully. "Safety deposit box," he said confidently. "Standard size. You'll need to know which bank, though." I thanked him and left, adding this new puzzle piece to my mental board. A safety deposit box. Mark had never mentioned having one. What was he hiding? When I pulled into my driveway at 1:45, Gina's red SUV was already parked at the curb. She stood on my porch, bouncing Tyler gently in her arms. She'd dressed for the occasion, sleek black pants, emerald blouse, hair perfectly styled. The picture of a grieving lover ready to claim her inheritance. "You're early," I said, unlocking the door. "I was excited to see the place," she replied, following me inside. "Mark described it so often. I feel like I already know every room." I doubted that very much, but I kept my expression neutral. "Would you like some tea?" That would be lovely. She followed me to the kitchen, looking around with unconcealed interest. This is even nicer than the photos Mark showed me. I filled the kettle, watching her from the corner of my eye. She moved with confidence, setting Tyler down on a blanket she spread on my kitchen floor. The baby gurgled happily, reaching for toys she pulled from her bag. "He has Mark's smile," she said, catching me looking. "Don't you think?" I studied the child. Round cheeks, dark hair, bright eyes. Maybe there was a resemblance, or maybe I was seeing what she wanted me to see. "I'm not sure," I said honestly. Gina sighed dramatically. "I know this is hard for you, finding out your husband had another life, another family. Is that what you were, his family? We were going to be." She straightened, meeting my eyes directly. "Mark was planning to leave you. He just ran out of time." The kettle whistled, giving me a moment to compose myself. I poured hot water over tea bags, set a cup in front of her. "Tell me about the will," I said, sitting across from her. "When did Mark have it drawn up?" Gina reached into her purse, pulled out the document she'd shown me at the party. 3 months before he died, when I told him I was pregnant, I took the paper, examined it more carefully this time. It looked professional, legal language, official-seeming stamps. Mark's signature at the bottom did look like his, but there were details that felt off. The attorney's name, James Whitman, wasn't familiar, and there was a reference to our cabin in Vermont that we definitely didn't own. "I was surprised when he told me about this," I said casually, handing the document back. "We discussed wills before, but Mark always put it off. Said we were too young to worry about dying." Gina's smile tightened slightly. "Becoming a father changes a man's perspective. I suppose it would." I sipped my tea. "You mentioned an attorney? For the property transfer?" "Yes, Mark's attorney, actually. James Whitman. He drew up the will. Interesting. The same name on the document. I'd like to speak with him directly." "Of course. I'll set up a meeting next week." Gina glanced around the kitchen again. "Mark said this place has 4 bedrooms? 3, plus my office. Perfect. Tyler will need his own room, of course. And I was thinking the master bedroom. It's blessed. Let's not get ahead of ourselves." I interrupted, my voice sharp despite my best efforts. "There are legal issues to sort through first." Gina's expression hardened slightly. "The will is quite clear, Abby. Half of this house belongs to Tyler. To me, as his guardian. The will may say that. But there's a problem." I met her gaze steadily. "Mark couldn't leave what wasn't his to give. This house is solely in my name. I bought it before we married. It was never part of our marital assets." For the first time, uncertainty flickered across her face. That's not what Mark told me." "Mark told you a lot of things, apparently." I stood up. "Would you like to see the deed? The mortgage documents? All with only my signature." Gina recovered quickly, her confident smile returning. "That's a minor complication. As Mark's widow, you're obligated to provide for his son. Any court would agree. Perhaps. But we'd need proof that Tyler is indeed Mark's son." I kept my voice gentle, aware of the baby playing at our feet. "DNA testing is standard in these cases." A flash of something, panic, crossed her features before she masked it. "Of course. I have nothing to hide." "Good." I smiled thinly. "Neither do I." Gina stayed for another 30 minutes, walking through my home like she already owned it, making comments about changes she'd make. I maintained a calm facade, letting her talk herself into a deeper hole with every presumptuous statement. As she was leaving, she paused at the door. "Mark always said you were reasonable, that you'd understand if you knew the truth. That's why I approached you this way, directly, honestly." The irony was almost too much. Did he? How considerate of him. "We don't have to be enemies, Abby. We both loved the same man." I looked at her. This woman who'd slept with my husband, who was now trying to take my home, who'd humiliated me publicly. Did we, though? I'm starting to wonder if either of us knew him at all. After she left, I sat on my porch steps, watching her drive away. The confrontation had confirmed what I already suspected. The will was fake. Gina was lying. About something. Maybe everything. But why? What was her real game? My phone rang. Patricia, my attorney, returning my call. I explained the situation, sent her photos of the will Gina had shown me. This is concerning, Patricia said after reviewing everything. If she's presenting a fraudulent will, that's criminal. But we need to be careful how we proceed. What do you recommend? Don't confront her directly yet. Let her think you're considering her claims while we investigate. I'll look into this attorney, James Whitman, and we should discuss a restraining order if she continues to show up unannounced. After hanging up, I went back to Mark's notebook, rereading entries, looking for clues. The dates aligned with his business trips, with late nights at the office. He'd been methodical in his deception, but something still bothered me about the timeline. If Tyler had just turned 1, and Gina had taken leave from November to February, when exactly had she given birth? And why would Mark need to be told about the baby just 2 weeks before his death if he'd known about the pregnancy for months? I pulled out a calendar, started marking dates. Mark's trips, Gina's leave, Tyler's birthday. The more I mapped it out, the less sense it made, unless a horrible suspicion began forming in my mind. I needed more information, more evidence. But if I was right, if what I was beginning to suspect was true, then Gina's deception went far beyond a fake will or a claim on my house. It was something much darker, something worth destroying lives for. I picked up my phone and dialed a number I hadn't used in years. It rang 3 times before a gruff voice answered. Dante Investigations. Carlos, it's Abby Preston. I need your help with something delicate. I need everything you can find on Gina Hamilton, I told Carlos. Employment history, financial records, personal background, and I need it quickly. Sounds serious, he replied. What's this about? She claims my late husband fathered her child and left her half my house in his will. I think she's lying about, well, possibly everything. Carlos whistled low. That's cold. I'll start digging today. One more thing, I added. I found a key to what might be a safety deposit box. Can you help me figure out which bank? That'll take longer. Banks don't exactly advertise their clients' private boxes. Try First National Downtown first, I suggested. Mark did his business banking there. After hanging up, I sat in my kitchen, staring at the space where Gina had spread her blanket, where Tyler had played on my floor. The baby seemed innocent enough, but was he Mark's? Was he even hers? The next day was Sunday. I drove to my mother-in-law's house, heart heavy with what I needed to ask her. Eleanor had been devastated by Mark's death. Eleanor losing her only son just 3 years after becoming a widow herself. I hadn't told her about Gina's claims yet, not wanting to add to her grief. Eleanor welcomed me with a warm hug. At 68, she was still elegant and sharp, her silver hair cut in a stylish bob. We sat in her sunroom, drinking tea from her good china, a ritual she maintained no matter the occasion. You look troubled, dear, she said, studying my face. More than usual, I mean. I took a deep breath. Eleanor, did Mark ever mention someone named Gina to you? A woman from work? She frowned slightly. I don't believe so. Why? She came to see me yesterday, she says. The words stuck in my throat. She says Mark was the father of her child, a 1-year-old boy named Tyler. Eleanor's teacup clattered against its saucer. That's ridiculous. Mark would have told me if I had a grandchild. I thought so too, but she has evidence, and the timing could work. What evidence? Eleanor's voice had hardened, protective of her son's memory. I hesitated. Messages, dates, and a will that leaves half my house to her son. A will? She shook her head firmly. Mark didn't have a will. I asked him about it after Bernard died. He said you two hadn't gotten around to it yet. That confirmed what I'd already suspected. The will mentions a cabin in Vermont. Did Mark ever talk about buying property there? Vermont? No, never. Eleanor set down her cup. Mark hated the cold. Why would he buy property somewhere with worse winters than here? Another nail in the coffin of Gina's story. There's something else I wanted to ask you, I said carefully. Did Mark ever mention having a safety deposit box? I found a key. Eleanor's expression changed subtly. He did, actually. After his father died, Bernard kept important documents in one, and Mark thought it was a good idea. I believe it was at First National. My pulse quickened. Did he mention what he kept there? Insurance policies, I think. Maybe some family heirlooms. She paused. I could go with you, if you'd like. The bank might be more cooperative if I'm there. Mark was always close to that manager. What was his name? David something. David Chen, I supplied. That would be helpful, thank you. As I was leaving, Eleanor grabbed my hand. Abby, this woman, what does she want? Money, I said simply. Or at least, that's what she says she wants. Eleanor's grip tightened. Don't let her tarnish Mark's memory with lies. Whatever the truth is, find it. Monday morning arrived with a text from Carlos. Found something interesting. Can you meet at 11? I told my boss I had an appointment and left the office at 10:30, carefully avoiding the accounting department where Gina worked. Carlos was waiting at a cafe 2 blocks away, a manila folder on the table in front of him. That was fast, I said, sliding into the booth across from him. You're paying my rush fee, he reminded me with a half smile. And your Gina Hamilton is interesting. How so? He opened the folder, revealing printouts of documents, photos, and notes in his messy handwriting. For starters, she's only been Gina Hamilton for 3 years. Before that, she was Gina Harper. Name change after a divorce. Normal enough. But before that, Regina Woodson from Telluride, Colorado. Multiple name changes and multiple jobs. Never stays anywhere longer than 2 years. Always in accounting or finance. Always at mid-sized firms where she has access to money but isn't under too much scrutiny. A chill ran down my spine. Are you saying she's some kind of con artist? I'm saying she has a pattern. And it gets better. He slid a photo across the table. It showed Gina, hair dyed blonde, standing beside a gray-haired man in front of a lake house. This was taken 4 years ago in Michigan. The man is Harold Brennan, CFO of a manufacturing company where she worked as an accounting manager. 63 years old, wealthy, recently widowed. I studied the photo. They were standing close, his arm around her waist. Were they involved? Engaged, according to local news. He died 2 months before the wedding. Heart attack. Carlos raised an eyebrow. His children contested the will, which left a significant portion of his estate to his beloved fiancée, Gina, but ultimately settled out of court. My mouth went dry. You think she? I'm not suggesting murder, Carlos said quickly, just noting a pattern of targeting vulnerable men with money, then benefiting from their deaths or divorces. He pulled out another document. 3 months after Brennan's death, she moved here and started working at your company. 6 months later, she met your husband. I sat back, mind racing. What about the baby, Tyler? Carlos hesitated. That's where it gets complicated. I haven't found birth records for a Tyler Hamilton or Harper in any local hospital. What are you saying? I'm saying either she gave birth somewhere else or Tyler isn't her child. I finished, the horrible suspicion I'd had earlier returning with force. Carlos nodded grimly. I'm still looking into it, but given her history, I wouldn't put anything past her. I left the cafe with my head spinning, Carlos's folder tucked into my bag. If Gina was a con artist who targeted wealthy men, had Mark been her latest victim? Had he discovered her scheme? Was that why he died? The thought made my blood run cold. I'd been assuming Mark's death was an accident. What if it wasn't? I picked up Eleanor at 2 p.m., and we drove to First National Bank together. David Chen greeted us warmly, his expression softening with sympathy when Eleanor explained why we were there. Of course, Mrs. Preston. We'll need to verify your status as next of kin, but that shouldn't be a problem. He led us to a private office, where Eleanor produced Mark's death certificate and their family documents. 20 minutes later, we were escorted to the vault. The safety deposit box opened with a combination of my key and the bank's master key, revealing a stack of documents and a small velvet pouch. I lifted out the papers first. Insurance policies, as Eleanor had mentioned, our marriage certificate, and underneath it all, a sealed envelope with my name written on it in Mark's handwriting. My hands trembled as I picked it up. "I'd like to read this privately, if you don't mind," I told Eleanor and David. They stepped outside the small viewing room, leaving me alone with Mark's final message to me. I broke the seal carefully and unfolded the letter inside. "Abby," it began. "If you're reading this, something has happened to me. I hope it's decades from now, when we're old and gray. But if not, there are things you need to know." My heart pounded as I read on. "I've made a terrible mistake. There's a woman at work, Gina Hamilton. We had a brief relationship last year. It meant nothing to me. A stupid moment of weakness during a business trip. I ended it immediately, but she's become unstable. She's threatened to tell everyone, that we're still involved. She wants money. At first I paid her, small amounts to keep her quiet, but her demands have grown. Now she's claiming to be pregnant with my child, which is impossible. We were only together once, over a year ago. I've been gathering evidence of her extortion, bank transfers, emails, recordings of our conversations. It's all in a flash drive in the velvet pouch. I'm meeting with a lawyer next week to discuss a restraining order. I'm so sorry, Abby. I never meant to hurt you. Whatever happens, know that I love you. You're the only one I've ever truly loved. Forgive me, Mark." I sat motionless, tears streaming down my face. The letter was dated 2 days before his accident, before his death. With shaking hands, I opened the velvet pouch and found a small flash drive. I slipped it and the letter into my purse, then called Eleanor back in. "Are you all right?" she asked, seeing my tear-streaked face. "I will be," I promised. "Let's take these documents and go." That night, alone in my home office, I plugged the flash drive into my computer. It contained exactly what Mark had described: evidence of Gina's extortion, email threads where she demanded money, voice recordings where she threatened to ruin him if he didn't pay, bank statements showing transfers to an account in her name. In the final recording, dated just 3 days before his death, her voice was cold and calculating. "You think you can just pay me off and I'll disappear? It doesn't work that way, Mark. I own you now. And if you don't give me what I want, I'll destroy everything you care about. Your marriage, your career, your perfect little life. By the time I'm done, Abby will hate you, your mother will disown you, and you'll be lucky if you're not in jail." Mark's voice, strained but determined. "This ends now, Gina. I've documented everything. The payments, the threats. I'm going to the police." Her laugh sent chills down my spine. "With what evidence? Your word against mine? I'll tell them you've been stalking me, harassing me. I'll show them the gifts you gave me, the messages you sent. Who do you think they'll believe? The married executive or the poor single woman just trying to do her job? I have recordings, bank records. Recordings can be edited, payments can be explained. You have no idea who you're dealing with, Mark. I've destroyed better men than you." The recording ended there. I sat in the dark, staring at my screen, a cold rage building inside me. This woman had tormented my husband, possibly driven him to his death, and now was trying to steal my home using a child that might not even be hers as leverage. It was time to end her game. Tuesday morning, I called Patricia and sent her copies of everything I'd found. Then I contacted Carlos with new instructions. By afternoon, I had a plan. I waited until Wednesday to confront Gina. I found her in the office kitchen, alone, fixing herself tea. "We need to talk," I said quietly. "About the will, about Tyler." She turned, her practiced sympathetic expression sliding into place. "Of course. I know this is difficult." "Not here," I interrupted. "My house. Tonight at 7. I can do that." She smiled, confident. "I'm glad you're being reasonable about this, Abby." "Oh, I'm being very reasonable," I assured her. "See you tonight." At 6:45, I was ready. Patricia sat in my living room, documents spread across the coffee table. Carlos waited in the kitchen, out of sight. Eleanor had insisted on being there too, sitting rigidly on my sofa, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. The doorbell rang at 7 sharp. I took a deep breath and opened it to find Gina standing there, alone. "No Tyler tonight?" I asked as I led her to the living room. "He's with a sitter." I thought this might be tense. She stopped short when she saw Patricia and Eleanor. I didn't realize this would be a group meeting. "Please sit down," I said, gesturing to an armchair facing the three of us. "This is Patricia Chen, my attorney. And you know Eleanor, Mark's mother." Gina sat stiffly, her confident smile faltering slightly. "Is this really necessary? I thought we could discuss this amicably." "Oh, I'm very interested in being amicable," I said, my voice deadly calm. "Let's start with your real name. Is it Gina Hamilton? Gina Harper? Or Regina Woodson?" Her face paled, but she recovered quickly. "I don't know what you're talking about. I changed my name after my divorce, that's all. And before that, in Michigan, with Harold Brennan, I placed the photo Carlos had found on the table between us. He died rather suddenly, didn't he? Just before your wedding." "This is ridiculous," she snapped. "What does any of this have to do with Mark's will?" "The will is fake," Patricia interjected calmly. "We've confirmed that no such document was ever filed, and the attorney who supposedly drafted it, James Whitman, doesn't exist in any bar association registry in this state." Gina's eyes darted between us. "Mark gave me that will. If it's not official, that's not my fault." "Mark didn't give you anything," I said, pulling out his letter. "He wrote this 2 days before he died. Would you like me to read it aloud?" "I don't know what game you're playing." "It's not a game," Eleanor cut in, her voice shaking with anger. "You're trying to use my son's death for your own gain, claiming a child he never fathered." "Tyler is Mark's son," Gina insisted, but her voice had lost its conviction. "Where was Tyler born, Gina?" I asked quietly. "Which hospital?" "Because we can't find any birth records for him. Not here, not in Michigan, not in Colorado." Her hands clenched in her lap. "This is harassment. I'm leaving." "Before you do," I said, "you should know that everything Mark recorded, your threats, your extortion, has been given to the police. And Carlos here," I nodded toward the kitchen where he now stood, "has provided them with quite an interesting history of your activities in other states." Gina stood abruptly. "You can't prove anything." "Maybe not everything," I conceded. "But enough. Enough to launch an investigation. Enough to question your custody of Tyler. Inner Way, who, by the way, looks remarkably similar to a baby reported missing from a Denver hospital 14 months ago." The color drained completely from her face. "That's a lie." Is it?" The police seem very interested in testing Tyler's DNA. This was a bluff. Carlos had found similarities in news reports, but nothing conclusive. Yet, Gina grabbed her purse. "I'm not listening to this. You're just a bitter widow who can't accept that her husband loved someone else." "Mark didn't love you," I said, rising to face her. "He was afraid of you. And with good reason, apparently." She lunged forward suddenly, reaching for Mark's letter on the table. I stepped between her and the documents as Carlos moved quickly from the kitchen. In the confusion, Gina's purse fell open, spilling its contents across my floor. Among the scattered items was a small amber prescription bottle. I picked it up before she could grab it. "Propranolol," I read aloud, looking at the label. "Isn't this a heart medication? The same kind Harold Brennan was taking before his heart attack?" Gina snatched the bottle from my hand. "It's for anxiety. Give me my things." But I'd seen enough. The prescription wasn't in her name. It was for Mark Preston. The pieces fell into place with sickening clarity. Mark's unexpected heart failure during what should have been a minor accident. The missing medication from his nightstand that I'd attributed to first responders or hospital staff. "You killed him?" I whispered, the realization like ice in my veins. "You tampered with his medication. And then, when he threatened to expose you, you made sure he had an accident. That's insane, she hissed. But her eyes were wild now, darting toward the door. You can't prove any of this. Maybe not today. I agreed. But the police are very thorough once they start looking. And they're already looking, Gina. She backed toward the door. This isn't over. Actually, I said, it is. As she fled, Patricia picked up her phone. I'll call Detective Rivera. He'll want to know about the medication. Eleanor was shaking, tears streaming down her face. I sat beside her, taking her hand in mine. Did she kill my son? She asked brokenly. I don't know for certain, I answered honestly, but we're going to find out. It took 3 more weeks for the full truth to emerge. The police investigation revealed that Tyler was indeed the missing baby from Denver, abducted by a woman matching Gina's description who had posed as a hospital volunteer. DNA testing confirmed he wasn't related to either Mark or Gina. The medication bottle provided critical evidence. Forensic analysis showed Mark's pills had been replaced with a much higher dosage, enough to cause disorientation or unconsciousness while driving. Not technically murder, but certainly manslaughter if they could prove she'd tampered with them. Gina fled the state the night of our confrontation, but was apprehended at the Canadian border 3 days later. Tyler, with her, the baby was returned to his real parents in Denver, a reunion that made national news. As for me, I finally had answers, though they brought more pain than closure. Mark had made a terrible mistake, one that ultimately cost him his life. But he hadn't abandoned me, hadn't fathered another woman's child, hadn't written a will giving away my home. 6 months after Mark's death, I stood in our backyard, watching Eleanor plant bulbs along the fence line. She visited often now, our shared grief and quest for justice having forged a deeper bond between us. The prosecutor called, I told her, handing her a glass of lemonade. They've added identity theft and fraud charges based on evidence from Michigan. They're confident she'll serve significant time. Eleanor nodded, wiping soil from her hands. It doesn't bring him back. No, I agreed. Nothing will. We sat in comfortable silence, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of pink and gold. The grief was still there, would always be there, but the anger had subsided, replaced by a quiet determination to move forward. I'm selling the house, I said suddenly. It's too big for just me. Too many memories. Eleanor squeezed my hand. Where will you go? I'm not sure yet. Somewhere new. Somewhere I can start fresh. I smiled faintly. But not too far. I want to be able to have Sunday tea with you. I'd like that, she said softly. Later that night, alone in my kitchen, I opened the notebook where I'd been documenting everything since that first birthday party, when Gina had made her outrageous claim. The final entry detailed her sentencing, 15 to 20 years for a litany of charges, including kidnapping, identity fraud, extortion, and involuntary manslaughter. The woman who had tried to steal my life, who had possibly taken my husband's, would spend most of her remaining youth behind bars. Her schemes, her lies, her manipulations had finally caught up with her. Some might call it justice, others karma, but I knew the truth. It wasn't revenge that had brought Gina down. It was patience, thoroughness, a refusal to be intimidated or bullied into surrender. In the end, I hadn't needed to destroy her. She'd done that all by herself. I'd simply made sure she couldn't escape the consequences of her actions. I closed the notebook and placed it on a shelf in my office, a reminder not of what I'd lost, but of what I'd survived. Tomorrow, I would call a real estate agent. The day after, I would look at apartments closer to downtown. Life would go on, and somewhere in Denver, a little boy named Tyler was back with his real parents. Too young to remember the woman who had tried to use him as a pawn in her deadly game. That, perhaps, was the most important victory of all. If you've ever been underestimated by someone who thought they could manipulate you, hit that like button. If this story of patience and justice resonated with you, subscribe for more true life-inspired tales of resilience. And if you know someone dealing with gaslighting or manipulation, share this video with them. Sometimes seeing through someone else's experience helps us recognize what's happening in our own lives. Drop a comment below with your thoughts on Abby's journey. What would you have done in her situation?